Mr. Lightfriend was my grandfather, so he spoke the last time about it. For the little way him tell me, when him grew up, him used to go sell banana and thing on the train, you know. I saw him used to make female money. You know, so him go pick him chocha when the train come and he want banana and he want chocha and go sell it, you know. So in the great Kendal crash as we are speak about at this present time, well, him say, the night, because it's like close to night it happened. So it's like in the night when them hear the boom 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 boof and everything turn chaos, and by the time them go on and them see this scatter, people scatter, breadfruit scatter, everything mash up.
Hi, my name is Saundrie. You're listening to Kendal Konnect, part of the Voices of Jamaica podcast series made possible by the Alpha School of Music with support from the Public Affairs Office from the U.S. Embassy in Kingston. Kendal Konnect takes it to the streets so you can hear directly from residents in a small community in cool Manchester called, you've guessed it, Kendal. Kendal is located in Williamsfield in Manchester, Jamaica. It is about 46 miles or 73 kilometers west of Jamaica's capital city. It takes you about 1 hour and 35 minutes to get there from downtown Kingston. Kendal is a quiet area that houses a rich history, and the people are very welcoming and friendly. One of the first things I found out was that a large part of the present community was originally estate property, which isn't surprising given Jamaica's history. So of course I did some digging. There is a lot of information around that, a little bit too much for this podcast to get into, but I found listings dating back to 1817 and even some as far back as 1811. With the changes in parish assignments over the years, some more research would be needed to see how many of these listings actually connect to present-day Kendal. The better part of the community's history, though, is tied to a major event in 1957, the Kendal train crash. And interestingly, the property where the accident took place was actually part of an estate. That land was given to the community by the owner of the estate, and the burial ground was part of the package. The great house still sits there, and if you visit, community members are more than happy to show you around as best as they can. The part of the story I want to focus on today, though, is not the estate history. Instead, I want to focus on the event I just mentioned, the Kendal train crash of 1957. This year, 2021, marks 64 years since the tragedy, and so I visited the community to see what I could learn. At the time the crash happened, it was the second deadliest rail accident ever, and so you can understand why this event would be central to the community's story. The accident claimed several lives, caused the injuries to many others, and left an indelible mark etched in the collective mind of the community. So on the way, I decided to ask people about the crash, find out what, if anything, they knew. Here are some responses.
The only thing we know about the crash is that the most of Alcan workers them waiting on the train to pass to have lunch. Because the train pass like, when them say like 10 to 12 or 5 to 12, the train always pass. And then everybody look out for the train, can't see the train, the man them want them lunch and then can't see the train come. When they hear a train crash.
Well, I wasn't born and growing in Kendal, but recently since I came, I did a research about it, and what I heard is that they had a couple survivors, but one male gentleman, him normally, every year when it's this time, they always have something by the Kendal camp for him.
Missionary church.
And the missionary church. And before the train crash, I think his mother was praying or something like that. So basically, then growing up and coming and living this side, basically we just hear like stories over and over, nothing more.
I'm not from Kendal, but I live here for a period of time, and I heard that before the train crash, they were having fun. People went to beach, people went to parties, who went to church or whatever. And you know, when they reach a distance and coming home, a lady was so tired to stand up. And she asked a young man to get up from the seat at one of the cabin door. and asked him to give her the seat. And the young man did so and give her the seat. But by the time the young man to settle down, the train collided and started to derail.
So my journey was a fun and very interesting one. My first stop was at a corner shop to ask directions to the community. It turns out that the person I was asking for directions was related to someone who was on board the train that fateful day. In fact, 4 of the persons on that location were family members. The one I spoke to asked not to be named, but said his uncle was one of the conductors on the train.
Well, I was about 7 years of age at that time. My father told me that my uncle, which is Garnet Lurch, was driving the train. He told us that when he heard the train horn blow about 3 or 4 times, signaling some distressful sort of say he suspected that something went wrong. And then in the morning he heard earlier in the night that there was a train crash down by Kendal. We were living about a mile and a half from where this happened. He went down there. Well, he was unable to find his brother at that time. It was a crash. And what I did know in the morning when we got up, we saw trucks, like the parish council truck, which one of our neighbors was the driver of one of those trucks. The name is Lyndall Walters. His truck was transporting the dead bodies to the Mandeville Hospital. So we was at the gate watching such situation. We did not go to school that morning because it was sort of scary. We always, as a child, you're scared about these things. My uncle, which when I heard mostly about him, I remember that they said he was a good cricketer. He used to play for Lucas Cricket Club as an opening batsman. Well, he passed off at about 90th when I saw it in the paper.
So hold on, that is it. The man who was driving the train, he survived the crash.
Yes.
And then passed off later on at about 90 something.
Yeah. He died. That's basically most of it that I know. I know that the bodies was buried along the train line down over by the backside land there. Myself and my father was a butcher. So sometime when we used to when he's going to butcher pigs or so, and I would journey with him, I would walk across the place where these people was buried. I'd be afraid, but because my father was there, I went along with him.
How you know when you reach the spot and you hear any stories about the spot?
Yes, well, you see the graves here, my father showed me because he knew it. So he said, this is where these people, some of these people who was on the train crash buried. So we see the grave and the little piece of stick with numbers on them. But most that's what I knew.
Not many persons with direct memories of that crash are still around. Some have passed on and others have migrated. However, the community still carries that memory, and even the younger persons there know at least some information about that tragic accident. My guide on the day was O'Neill French. His family has roots in Kendal.
Well, Mr. Lloyd French was my grandfather, so he spoke the last time about it. Well, for the little way him tell me, is that when he grew up, he used to go sell banana and things on the train, you know. I saw him used to make female come money. So him go pick him chocha when the train come and he want banana and he want chocha and go sell it, you know. So in the great Kendal crash as we are speak about at this present time, well, him say the night, because it's like close to night it happened. So it's like in the night when they hear the boom, 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 boof and everything turn chaos, and by the time them go on and them see this scatter, people scatter, breadfruit scatter, everything mash up. Limb, hand, head. Well, you can't imagine from where me I say how it was.
We walked a short distance with O'Neill to see the railroad and the burial site of the crash victims. We walked through a churchyard and a burial ground that were on property donated to the community. So remember I told you about that earlier? Well, this was it. the land donated by the former plantation owner Ernest Clark. The graveyard has tombs dating as far back as the 1800s, and many of those buried in that graveyard had worked on the plantation. A few feet away was a train line along which locomotives traveled back in the day. We followed that train line to see if we could make it to the crash site. Most of the railway is now overgrown, but tracks run through, allowing for at least pedestrian movement. So 2 markers are in place as a reminder of the crash. There is one at the actual site, and there is another on the main road near the old train station. The one that is near the train station is a metal marker that is almost impossible to read and needs to be replaced. That might have faded, but not so the memories of the people. They have stories that have been passed down for generations.
I live right just at the time. I live up the road a little nearer to the crash.
Okay.
So when it crashed, me just come across run across the bush there and catch it. And after that now, I could remember say when me run across the bush I go on. They come in like me go up and come back down. Because what happened to me now, same as me I run and I jump the grass, I've been tall and I jump over the grass. I go on. When we go up in the air, I come down, I want to be dead woman, me see right under my foot. I check that I believe I go down me. Because so I come in like me go back, come in and jump on it.
Yeah.
So because the train crash now, they are the first affect them by crash, you know. But plenty of people don't have it that way because the train maybe leave Montego Bay for 2 o'clock a day.
Right.
But the people them no scatter. Them children no use so the Montego Bay then come on town. And they scatter all about. They couldn't find them and couldn't leave them. So then he never left till about 6 o'clock.
Right.
That's why it reached up at that time. And when it reached up here now, the crash happened about 5 or 10 minutes after 12. That's why it named 1st of September.
Okay.
And 1st of September really happened just after 12.
August 31. Right.
There have been conflicting stories as to whether the crash happened on August 31 or on September 1. And this is mainly because of the time of night that it happened. But what we do know is that there was an excursion from Kingston to Montego Bay that was hosted by the St. Anne's Roman Catholic Church. It was on the return leg that the accident unfolded. The return leg to Kingston was full of excitement and chatter and laughter. There was gambling and drinking and other activities taking place on board the train. Now, here's a train, barreling toward the quiet town of Kendal, and then the driver made a signal. 3 shrill whistles. Something had gone terribly wrong. The train rattled as the passenger cars came loose from the engine, and the coaches toppled into the gully at the side of the tracks, creating a pile of metal, wood, injured persons, and dead bodies. 8 of the 12 wooden coaches were wrecked, with the dead and injured inside, underneath, and on top, bodies and body parts strewn over a wide area. Some persons died on impact. Many others died from being spiked by splinters from the wooden coaches and from various other injuries. The result was a terrible accident. As daylight broke on September 1, the carnage became clear. People came from neighboring communities to see what had taken place. Approximately 200 passengers had been killed and hundreds more had been injured. People rallied around to assist who they could, while others looked to see if they recognized anyone among the dead or injured. It is said that others used the opportunity to steal money and jewelry. It was an awful sight to see and a difficult wreckage to clear. Many of the dead were later buried in a mass grave near the crash site.
It crashed so bad so till them have to throw some of the people in the pan. Everybody couldn't bury. A whole heap of people. So it's a long story towards it, but the monument put up feet.
The accident happened on the Sunday, so the Friday of that week was observed as a national day of mourning, as world leaders sent messages of condolence and sympathy to the Jamaican people. So what really caused the accident? Some persons have attributed the crash to vandals pulling up the brake line, thinking that they were cutting the electricity on the train. This, they say, was because they wanted to rob persons on the train.
I think they mess with the brake line. So when the train almost reach near to the station to stop, that is where.
And that is the station right across here down the road?
Yeah, and it happened right there.
And it happened right across here?
So you have to hold the brake from up there, so no brake.
Okay.
So, and then it derail, jump off of the line.
After the crash, an official enquiry was launched, and the cause of the crash was said to be the closure of an angled wheel brake cock. It was suggested that the brakes had been tampered with. The enquiry found many deficiencies and asserted that the trains had been kept in poor condition. So I did a little bit more research, and the report indicated that the acting general manager at the time had essentially gotten some false brake certificates, and maybe if he had not done this, then the accident could have been avoided because the trains could have been properly serviced. Despite what the enquiry found out, there was also an indication that overcrowding of the coaches played a real significant role in the extent of the carnage. Additional coaches had been added to accommodate the large number of passengers because the church had sold a lot of tickets for that excursion. So essentially there were too many people aboard the train. After the Kendal disaster, all wooden coaches were replaced with sturdier metal ones, but public confidence in rail transport still declined. You know what I found interesting though? That most of the persons I spoke with who didn't want to be recorded told me that one of the main issues they had in the community was a lack of employment. And you might be wondering how I've jumped from what happened with the train to this situation. The decline of the rail industry means that there will be less opportunities for that community. And with less opportunities, it means that people have to find different ways of earning, and so they would leave the community. That hasn't changed much over the years, and so the decline has continued. So they say that Kendal has a lot of history to highlight, especially around this particular crash, because they have had a number of visitors from time to time. And this is something that we can use as a country to build community tourism for that particular area. They, however, say that the powers that be don't seem to be interested in investing in that kind of idea. So many of them have expressed that they would prefer to remain in Kendal, but because the ability to earn is limited, they opt to leave. All in all, I found that Kendal has great potential and development can actually take place. And I mean the kind of development that can limit migration and create positive opportunities for the community. So here's a final analysis. The Kendal train crash has been a significant part of Jamaica's history, and that should not be forgotten. There are also other treasures within that small community, and I think that both the potential of the community's resources and history, as well as the people, should be developed. And as some residents told me, the way the Kendal crash is remembered can be a great starting point for that development. And that's it for Kendal Konnect. My name is Saundrie. You are listening to Kendal Konnect, part of the Voices of Jamaica podcast series made possible by the Alpha School of Music with support from the Public Affairs Office at the U.S. Embassy in Kingston.
For more information about the Voices of Jamaica and the stories they tell, please visit the Alpha School of Music website, alphamusicja.com, and click on the Voices of Jamaica link.